Hi, I'm Angela Clark with Threadwaggle Quilting, and what we're going to be doing is a project of the month on the Quilting Academy for QuiltPath. So the first week of every month I will be releasing a new project that's going to teach you some different skills that will help you know your quilt path a little bit better. So for January we're going to do a table runner, and it is going to be a pretty simple table runner. We're going to start off in pano stacker, so we're going to do a pantograph, and we're going to quilt our pantograph, and then we are going to applique something on top of our pantograph using QuiltPath as well. So I hope you enjoy the projects that we have coming, and we're looking forward to us having a really fun journey together, you learning QuiltPath and us building a community on the Quilting Academy. Okay, so we're going to start this month's project by going into pantograph. And I'm going to say OK. And you need to sew. And this is a good lesson. I am in simulation mode. And the reason I know I'm in simulation mode is that it asks me to enter a number in instead of setting my safe area. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and say OK. And then I'm going to come back out to my home screen. Do you see up here in the right corner where it says not connected? I'm going to tap on that and tell it I would like to reconnect. It's going to restart my program. And it's going to tell me that it needs to be centered so that it can do its safety move. So anytime you go in and it asks you to put a number in instead of setting your safe area, you're in simulation mode, okay? Good thing to know. This is not my normal surface, so it did ask me what kind of sensing I have on my system. If you have an APQS machine and it ever asks you, puts up a screen about needle sensing and thread break sensing, you get to check all three of those, okay? That would be specific to APQS machines. I do not know the settings for all the different people who have Quilters Creative Touch, but your machine manufacturer should be able to give you those settings so that you know what they are. The whole idea is that if the machine is capable of telling you the needle is up or down, that way you don't have to just click through the screen that says raise your needle. Okay? If your machine does not have needle sensing on it, then it will give you a message that says make sure your needle's up. Make sure your, some of them even say make sure your presser foot's down. It's going to depend on what kind of machine it is. Okay? Okay, so now I'm going to go back into pantograph again, and this time it's going to ask me to set my safe area. Now, I'm just using a piece of material. This is not a quilt top. So my quilt top, my safe area is going to be set really close to the top of my quilt. This would not be normal. Normally your safe area is going to be way out here by your clamps, right? And you're going to be floating stuff inside your safe area. I'm still going to be doing that. This is more like practice cloth that I'm using right now. So I'm going to come up here and just go right above my quilt. I just want to keep it on my batting, which is really close right here. And I'm going to do the same thing over here and come way over here and give my cameraman a minute to catch up. And I'm going to hit the bottom right. Okay. Awesome. So now I have a safe area, and it is going to let me place things inside of this. Now my safe area is telling me right here that the area that I did set is 47.199 by 15.938. It's a good thing to look at, right, and see if those numbers make sense to you. I'm on an APQS Lenny. This Lenny is a 2022, so it's a relatively new Lenny. So it has about 16.5 inches of quiltable space if I go all the way to the back roller. So if I was on an older Lenny, I wouldn't have this much quiltable space, right? If I was on my Millie 30, I'd have a lot more. If I was on a Qnique, I'd also have a lot less, right? So it's important to know what the space that you have available is. And then you're going to set up how big you want your quilt. Most of the time when I am doing a quilt, I use the ruler to measure my quilt. This time I'm doing a table runner, and I want it to be about 40 inches long by 13 inches tall. It's not actually going to go in on my table in my case. It's going to go on my island across from my stovetop, right? So that's just the size that I would in that space. You can literally make this any size you want. You just have to have enough material loaded to do it, right? So I'm going to change my width to 40 and my height to 13 because that's the size I've decided I want. Okay, great. So now that we have that set, we need to select our pantograph. We are working in PowerPanto because it's the easiest mode to use in pantograph. And I'm going to use a design that comes with QuiltPath for this, and with Quilter's Creative Touch. So I am going to go to Select Pattern, and then on your last page of patterns, you will have one called Single Wave. It's a wavy line, right? So I'm going to use Single Wave, and it's going to put in a pattern. Now, it's going to kind of guess what you want on this. You might have it come in at 13 inches, which would just be like 1 or 2 lines across. It could come in 2 inches across. It kind of guesses what size you might want it to be. I want it a little bit closer together than this, so I'm going to actually set mine at 4, and it's going to change my pattern to have more wavy lines. So I do want it a little bit dense. I like my quilting dense though. If you don't want your quilting that dense, make it bigger and it won't be as dense. Okay, so it's actually measuring from the top of your trough down to the bottom of your trough, and my little troughs are going to be 4 inches tall. Okay. Okay, so this is really all I have to do. Once I have it looking the way I want it to look, I'm ready to go. The other thing you can do if you want it to still have that 4-inch trough but not have them so close together, you can use your vertical spacing. If I increase them, it'll give me fewer. If I decrease the number, it'll make them closer together. So you can control it that way as well, but I just want mine set at 0. I'm also going to suggest while we're in here that you just not play with horizontal spacing. Horizontal spacing is going to separate your pano from itself. So they're not going to be joined together anymore, and you're going to end up with a jump stitch or a straight line. So unless you really know what you're doing and know that you want that look, I would just skip the horizontal spacing. Some other things that you can do in here, you can do things like flip every other line. In QuiltPath we can stagger. In our version of version 5, there's other different things that you can do too in here, but right now all we want is this look. So we're going to say we are done, and I am going to do place as a single pattern, right? Because I can quilt 13 inches in 15, right? So I know it's going to fit in my space. If it's too big to fit in your space, you would need to sew in zones. It's going to work basically the same way, either way, okay? So I am going to place this using a 1-point corner setting. So where your placement settings are, and you have, says 1 point, 2 point, 4 block, 4 points, right? I'm on 1 point, which is the top one, and then I'm all the way over on the right on corner. Okay, so that's going to give me one gray node up in the top left corner of my design. And then that's what I'm placing. So the great thing about custom quilting in QuiltPath version 5 is that you touch what you want to be where your needle is. Your needle is your mouse cursor. So I would bring my needle up to where I wanted the top corner to be, touch the top corner, and it sets it at that point for me. It is so intuitive. It puts what you're touching where your needle is. Makes complete sense, right? Okay, so now I've got this set where I want it to set. I'm ready to quilt. So I'm going to hit the quilt button first. Sometimes I forget to do that, but we are going to hit quilt. And you're going to see the sew button down here. My start and stop point is up in the top left corner, right where my needle is. So I'm going to do needle down, needle up, and bring my thread up to the top. And then I'm just going to hit sew. Okay, so we finished quilting the table runner. It's completely quilted. Now what I want to do is I want to raw edge applique a snowflake on top of it. So to do that, I am going to go out of this part of the program, and I'm going to go out of Pantograph. So I'm going back to the home screen, right? If I want to size something before I quilt it, I would go into QuiltCAD, and then I would set the size up here on the very top right to the size I wanted. So I'm going to do, they've got about 13 inches. I'm going to do about let's do it a 10-inch snowflake. So I want my snowflake to be about 10 inches by 10 inches. Okay? And then I'm going to select my pattern. Now, this pattern that I'm using is available on my website. So I will have a link to that in the description for the video and on the article when I post it up on the Quilting Academy. Okay, so you'll be able to get the GPF files that you need to do this. So I'm going to hit double tap that so that my flake comes in, tap one of my squares so I can place my flake. Oops, and I hit the wrong button. I want to place my flake. And then I want to make it 10 inches. So I want to lock my aspect ratio, so tap the little lock, and I want to hit max in one of the two directions so that my flake takes up the entire space. Okay, then I'm going to hit quilt as a single pattern again. And this one thing is highlighted, so it's only going to send that one thing over to select and sew again. Okay, so now I have my flake. So I don't necessarily want my flake like centered in the middle of it. I want it kind of off a little bit. So what I am going to do is set my flake so that the center is right here. So I'm going to put a piece of fabric underneath this. So my fabric that I cut is about 13 inches. So I'm going to be wasting a little bit of fabric, and that's fine with me. I just want to make sure that my flake's in the right space. So I'm going to go ahead and do a 1-point center in this case, because I want to mark where the center of my flake is going to be. And I'm going to tap the center so that it puts it where I want it to be. Now, if I want to be able to see how this is in relationship to my quilt, right, I can go over to either plugins in the marking tool or the toolbox on the bottom left and the marking tool, and I can add my marks. So I probably should have done that to begin with, but I didn't. So it's gonna sound weird, but I'm gonna add 2 marks here because I can't really see what I'm doing. There's no corner at this one side, it's just a curve, right? And I'm gonna come over and mark these other 2. This is when I tell you my secret. They're trying to keep me seated because I have a foot injury and I'm in an air cast. So everyone's trying to keep me sitting down, and that doesn't work really well for me, but we're trying. Okay, so now I can see about where my flake is located. I used the marking tool to create my box, to make sure that was where I wanted it to be. If I wanted to, I could put a second mark in on about where I think I want my snowflake to be. But I like living dangerously, so I'm gonna say I want it to be right here and see what happens. So go back one. I'm gonna set it right here. And I just kind of want it sort of out of frame on the top and the bottom. Enough that it looks intentional, right? Okay, so I've got this, and then the last thing I want to do is make sure that I'm not going to hit my pins on the top, because I don't really know where they are up there. So I'm going to hit quilt, so I get to the quilting interface, and then I'm going to do plugins, and I'm going to do pattern eclipse, and I'm going to pattern eclipse at the top of my sewing area. So I'm going to scooch this down just a little bit so I can kind of see what's going on. So it's like right here. Okay, so I'm gonna do it here and just go straight across, and I can see the line here, so I can hover my needle over it, right? Go up. And it's that same situation where I want this to put a box above, and I'm not worried about the side. I can sew off the side and be perfectly fine. It is that top point that I want it to blunt off. So I'm going to do my preview like I said I would do before, and you're gonna see it's blunted off the top of it. And I'm gonna say, okay. Oops, I'm gonna close that and then say okay. Okay. And then I'm ready to quilt. Okay, so I am going to tell it to move it to my start point. So I'm going to do the toolbox, move to start point. I prefer to do it that way because it doesn't lock my machine. I think it's telling me it's at it. There we go. And I'm going to use that handle. Okay, like I said, it doesn't lock my machine. I can easily bring my thread up to the bottom. Then I can hit sew. I'm gonna let it start sewing. And then I'm gonna put my hands down on this surface of this, just to make sure that my fabric stays where I want it to stay. You could pin the fabric down, but I don't want to risk running over pins. Okay, and then I'm finished placing that pattern. I could place as many patterns or snowflakes as I wanted to across here. I'm just going to do one. And then I'm going to bring my, it tacked off when it started and stopped, so all I have to do is cut it. Now, I would use really sharp scissors when I'm doing this. I wouldn't be using little kid scissors. But now what you want to do is cut this about 1/8 of an inch away from your line. So when you are picking out designs to do this with, you want designs that are pretty simple in the outline because you're going to have to get your scissors down in there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to start over here, and it's going to seem kind of weird because I'm going to start off the thing, but I'm going to rip this big piece of fabric out of my way. Right? And then just start somewhere I feel like I can get back in there and start trimming this up. So I will put a picture up onto the Quilting Academy when I get it done. I'll probably put it in the video as well. But that's all I'm gonna do is sit here and cut it really close to the stitching lines. And then the first time I wash it, it's gonna kind of make those edges chenille a little bit and fray. And that's the look of raw edge applique, right? So I am purposely letting the edges fray a little bit on the edge of my design.